Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SEOs Getting Coffee. Today, we are really excited to introduce SEO Jo Blogs, who is our guest for the episode today. Jo, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you on. I'll allow you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Sean, and thank you very much, Emina, for having me on SEOs Getting Coffee today. Yes, my name is Jo Juliana Turnbull, and I run a remote digital remote consultancy business called Turn Global. And we help companies with their marketing and their SEO. We help them to go international. We have an office here in Barcelona, where I'm calling in from, and also in Brisbane. And outside of that, I also run an event called Search London. Been running that for 13 years.
It's a great event. It's a really good event.
Thank you. Thank you
On
for coming.
that note, let's do it now while everybody's fresh. When is the next event?
So the next Search London in London is taking place on Monday, June 17th at the Theatre Bullfrog Pub at 6 p.m.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got that in early so everybody can book their tickets as they're listening to this on Spotify or on YouTube. Yeah, brilliant. Thank
Correct.
you. Thank you very much, Jo. So today, the topic that we're going to be discussing and talking about is why is EQ or why EQ is important at work and especially in SEO. So I guess for those like myself who are not really familiar with the term EQ, could you just give us an overview of what that is and kind of give like a brief definition for those of us who don't know what it is?
Yes, I will. So EQ is also known as emotional intelligence, and it's the way that we handle our emotions and perceive those emotions of others. So it was actually first coined by two psychologists, Peter and John, back in 1990. And it's really about thinking that EQ may, in some situations, be more important than IQ. And the reason for that was because of Daniel Goldman. He actually revolutionized how we think about intelligence. And he challenged the fact that emotional intelligence was as important as IQ.
Okay.
Yeah. And why is it so obviously it's like I agree completely. I think there's this misconception that where IQ and EQ are something that is the same thing when it really isn't. And in SEO in particular, why is this? I mean, why would you benefit from having a high emotional intelligence in SEO?
So why would someone benefit from having high EQ or high emotional intelligence in SEO? This is because basically emotional intelligence is about there are primary components of it. It's like perceiving emotions, reasoning, and understanding and managing. So if you can manage your own emotions, you can understand others. If you can understand others, it helps you to build rapport and relationships with others. And we all need to build relationships with others, especially in a field such as SEO, where sometimes teams are working in silo. So that's why emotional intelligence is very important in SEO.
Yeah, and another one that I've been thinking, I looked at your kind of work around the topic, and what came to mind is also emotional intelligence in SEO because it's such a fast evolving field, and things like, for example, algorithm updates. I kind of feel like you need to have quite a lot of emotional intelligence as well as IQ to kind of deal with the constant algorithm updates. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, actually, to take it a step back, actually, there's actually 5 different elements of EQ,
Yeah.
and one of what you said is part of that. So there's self-awareness, which is the ability to control your behavior and emotions. You can pause between feeling and acting, and then sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Self-awareness is the ability to control your emotions and your behavior, so you're less likely to act impulsively. Self-regulation is the part about making that pause between that feeling and action, thinking taking the time to think through, make a plan, wait patiently. So if you get this, oh wow, this algorithm, it's like it's just come in, like me might have that for maybe a business director or a non-SEO team has sent an email to all your clients about, oh, this algorithm is all these websites are tanking. They didn't do two things, I would say: self-awareness and self-regulation. And you, as the SEO, you now then need to behave in a calm, collected manner and show the facts, what's happened and what you will do as a result. So I think that those two key elements of EQ is very important when it comes to algorithm. There's three other elements of EQ. One is motivation, the other is empathy, and the fifth one is social skills. And I think empathy is quite a good one as well, because this is one about, being a good listener, and you're slow to judge. You're able to recognize and understand how others are feeling and consider them before responding in social situations. So when you then, there's an algorithm update, maybe meeting a client that day, you can then sense how they're acting, and you can be more understanding towards them. And that actually really does have an impact on your relationship building with them.
No, it's interesting actually. Yeah, I quite like that. That I guess what I get from that is that we can use EQ then to kind of help us deal with the emotional roller coaster that is dealing with Google updates and the kind of continual flow of them. But it seems like recently, and all the kind of changes that are happening right now. I guess like what I'm picking up on as well though is that I guess it's about kind of improving communication, I guess, as well. Would that be the case?
Yeah, no, it's a big part about improving communication as well. So within emotional intelligence, you also have social skills. So if you're able to easily collaborate with others, I mean, this is what you need in a great leader. But it also again goes back to the relationship. It helps you to be able to connect and build those skills with others, because you're also actively listening. So you're understanding what people are saying, and you're taking a time to digest it and then respond, or you're aware of the nonverbal communications. So yes, it does help you to, well, with these algorithm updates, it helps you also to be a better communicator too.
Yeah.
The sorry on that, Emina. Sorry to jump in, but I think how do you think that instant messaging and communication has impacted? Like, do you think it's been like a negative or a positive impact on people's kind of responses in communication? I guess I know it's like a strange question, but I'm thinking like things like Slack, for example, is that I think one of the things that I can think of that is a difficulty for me and for our team, for example, is that you're not always really sure what the person's intention is when they're obviously typing and sending such short messages. How do you think that is the case? That like these do you think they've had these instant messaging kind of communications? Do you think they've had like a negative impact on like people's kind of I guess emotional management in a way, or the way that they kind of perceive things?
I think with the fact of this instant communication, I mean, we all want it, with whether it's Slack, WhatsApp, email, social media. But it's coming back to like, okay, can you sort of like have a pause between seeing that message and reacting? Because once the message is out there, you can't get it back. So if a client's asking you about these updates, and there it's like, I don't know, 10 a.m. and you haven't yet been able to analyze the results or be able to do a proper, deep dive into their site, I think it's totally fine to say, look, I'll come back to you. Don't worry. Or we still need time to look into this. I mean, if you look at some of the people that are reporting on some of these updates in the industry, they don't just do it overnight. They are looking through lots and lots of data to be able to come up with an answer. Of course, there are some sites that will be negatively impacted by updates, and they shouldn't be. There's been a lot of communication of that in the SERPs recently in the SEO industry. So it's really about taking your time, back to those 5 elements or components of emotional intelligence is the self-awareness, self-regulation, having I would definitely say the empathy is a big part, and then the social skills. How are you communicating with that? Maybe there's a tiny bit of motivation in there as well. Motivation of emotional intelligence is more like, do you constantly need praise, like from your manager, that you're doing a good job? Do you constantly need to have these rewards given to you? Or is your drive and your ambition enough? And I think if you're very confident in yourself and you're happy with how things are going, you don't need that extra, like, oh, if I send out the email now, my manager's going to be really happy with me. No, you can be like, okay, I think it's better to have a short message like, I'll look into that for you, but give me some time to give you a proper response. I think your manager will be probably more happy with that one.
Yeah, and one of the things that, kind of coming back to what you were saying, it all really comes back to this emotional intelligence, EQ. I think the framework is very good with like instant communications because it's so hard. It's so hard to apply emotional intelligence to digital tools. Sometimes you really have to think about it more than you have to think when you just see somebody face to face, because you don't have the cues that could kind of trigger it. So non-verbal language and stuff like that. It's super interesting. The other thing that I've noticed, oh, go ahead. Do you wanna pitch in that?
Oh no, I was just going to clarify, just to change between to just clarify between self-awareness and self-regulation, because yeah, it's very important, and maybe I wasn't clear on that. It's just that self-awareness is knowing what you're feeling and why, and then the self-regulation is choosing how to respond. So,
Yeah.
I think with these algorithm updates, these are both very two key elements, but it's
Yeah.
really how you choose to react in these situations that's key.
Yeah, of course, of course. And you mentioned leadership, and this is one of the questions that I had. I've been in situations where I kind of questioned the emotional intelligence of some of the leadership. I mean, I'm sure that maybe you've been in that situation, and you do sometimes kind of think, you're not reading the room type of thing. There's a bit of lack. What happens when your leadership is lacking the emotional intelligence? Why is it super important for leadership, for example, to have this?
I would say it's really important for leadership to have this emotional intelligence, because they are setting, they're supposed to be setting the trend, they're setting it up in the company. Of course, there's not everyone that's able to do everything. So some people aren't as emotional intelligent. I think it's okay if you're not, as long as you're aware. You can be aware of, okay, that's something that I need to work on. I have been in the situations where someone senior to me wasn't necessarily my boss, but wasn't the sort of um, the performance side of the business, when they were looking after sort of the clients. They were looking after clients for the paid search, display, and SEO, and they saw something about this update, and they immediately sent the clients the email, when then they thought they were being helpful, but I immediately
Yeah.
was like, no, that's not helpful at all, because what happened, we got loads of emails, and then you're automatically on the back foot. So how to counteract that? I set up a newsletter for us SEOs, that we shared with our clients. So we updated that every couple of weeks, and we shared that, and that worked very, very well. Of course, there's lots of other newsletters now in the industry. Women Tech SEO have a great newsletter. We also have Aleda Solis's SEO FOMO that comes out weekly. So that provides a lot of, especially Aleda's provides a lot of comfort. So if you've seen something happen, and maybe your boss has said something and you didn't want them to, have a look at what's been out in the news, and that can help to back up what you have been saying, especially if you're like a one or a two people team, and you don't have a lot of weight. Those sort of newsletters or other events or webinars that back up what you've been saying really do help.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not a challenge that came through as lack of emotional intelligence maybe kind of prompted you to actually put something in place that will help that, but it will also serve as a really good kind of resource for everybody in the company and clients, and it kind of goes beyond. The impact is even beyond, and it all started from this little kind of challenge that you had around somebody just sending something out that shouldn't have been sent, really. So good, really good example. The other question that I had is around, how do you measure it? So how do you, IQ, we know there's loads of tests for IQ. How would you measure your emotional intelligence?
Well, there are many different tests that you can use, or platforms you can use. I would actually recommend, first of all, for people, if they want to actually read Daniel Goleman's book. He published his book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. That was released in 1995, and it was a bestseller for 18 months, and now it's been translated into 40 different countries. So that's very, very insightful. And in terms of how can you test it, there are many different pages or sites you can go on. I found a few that that I've tried myself, and I'll share them as well in the chat. So one is called mindtools.com, one is called Psychology Today, one is called myframeworks.org, and there are free tests that you can do it's not obviously very in depth, of course, but it just lets you do a little bit of an overview of how you respond to different situations. There's another one. There's also paid ones that you can do, and I can share that as well. But there is a link that I will share that will go into those paid tests. But I would start with some of these free ones if you can, and also I can share a couple of examples if you want about how do you know if someone has low IQ versus high IQ if you want. EQ, sorry.
Yeah, it would be good, and we can then link them underneath, like on YouTube and on underneath the episode, just for anybody who's interested. And this idea of testing it, do you think that there is, I know that a lot of companies do personality tests. I've done a few of them, which is obviously kind of testing. It's a multi-dimensional testing of, some of it is IQ, some of it is EQ. Do you envision a future where would you suggest that actually that's one of the elements that people should be testing when they're hiring anybody, but SEOs in particular, because as we said, it's quite important?
Yes, I would suggest that. I'd actually, depending on where someone was educated, I think there were some schools in where I went to just a state school, but we did a lot of non-curricular activities to become a well-rounded person. We had to not focus on solely IQ, but look at different elements of EQ as well. And I know particularly in the US, you have to do a lot of that. You have to have a job, do volunteering, have to have 2 sports at university before you go to university, do that in high school, as well as have good grades, and maybe have an internship too, I think. So it seems like in some countries you're trying to be all well-rounded. You go to uni or college or post-school studies, and then you come out and then, okay, that's great, you're well-rounded. But then at work, I don't see that you have as much of that. It's more like, okay, you need to study for, let's say, to be a tech SEO, or you need to get better at client maybe reporting, GA4, do those courses. But I haven't seen as much the emphasis of, okay, maybe you should do a bit more about the art of client management or how to be a better manager. It tends to be more in some of the bigger organizations. So I would say it's very important to make sure that you have time for that in small and larger companies.
But from what I understand, I think is EQ is something which obviously can be improved, and people can obviously develop those skills, right, and become better with EQ, right? So they can kind of develop that. as they kind of go through their careers and get more experience, and obviously more experience with working with people, as well as obviously working and understanding themselves, right, as they kind of grow older, I guess. But from somebody, I'm a lot of a different person I am today compared to obviously when I first started out in my career. So obviously as your values change and things. So from what I understand it, EQ can obviously develop with you, whereas I think IQ. I believe. I mean, obviously people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe IQ is something which I think people argue is kind of like stationary, right? It's like that's your IQ, that's it, and there's not much you can kind of do about it. Whereas obviously EQ is a bit more of like you know, you can kind of work on it and you can get better. As far as I'm aware, anyway. And of course, that's kind of bringing that to both yourself, Jo, and Emina, for discussion.
Yeah, it's correct. Yes, you can be taught EQ. And I think the main thing really is just to be self aware, because not everyone is good at social situations, and that's totally fine. But we all have to work with each other. It's up to you if you want to have relationships outside of work. But I think if there's something that's lacking and you know that you need to work on it, then I would say yes, you should. Of course, I don't expect everyone to be like, oh, I'm going to be out and be the most social butterfly ever. No, but you need to be able to manage yourself well. I've shared a few things in the chat about those with a low EQ. If you become upset easily, if you have these emotional outbursts, if you don't listen to people and you blame others for their problems, for your own problems, sorry, um, that's not good. That's not a good working relationship, and that's also not good for yourself either. If those with a high EQ, they are able to remain calm. They're able to remain calm in stressful situations. They're composed. They can handle difficult people, with tact. They can also forgive and forget. So that's what makes those people good to work with. So I don't expect everyone that has to, you need to get a high EQ, but you need to at least be aware of yourself, your own emotions first.
Yeah, and I think it's super important what you were saying, this self-awareness. And if you have gaps, just make sure that you know your gaps so that you can try at least attempt to fill them. Another thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this topic is this idea that there's reported gender differences in EQ. So, for example, women are known. Some research claims that women have a higher EQ than men. Actually, have a look if you haven't seen it. Have a look online. I've been googling it. Which I want to say that that's true, obviously, because I'm all for women and stuff. But at the same time, we have the situation, particularly in SEO, where women are underrepresented. So what does that say about, I mean, for me, it's kind of like, it shows this battle between, what is more important, where actually both IQ and EQ are the same importance. So what do you think about that? Why does that happen?
Why does it happen that, there's less?
Yeah, less women in the industry, and at the same time, you have the situation where EQ is supposed to be like a female heavy, it's higher with women than it is maybe
Yeah.
with men.
I think it hasn't really, the term EQ hasn't been given the justification, the space, the room in a company that it deserves, because perhaps, maybe because it seems too difficult to measure, although you can measure it. If you are in a team and there is a good, if the leader has high EQ, you're more likely to see less churn. I have actually a couple of stats, because I was like facts instead of just like, coming up with it. So there was a career builder survey, so a company in the US, they said that 71% of employers value emotional intelligence over IQ. There were studies by a company, by two people, Bar and Parker, back, this is 2000 now, so it's a very long time ago. They said it improves the physical and psychological health of people and encourages academic and business performance. There is another study, Schutt and al., 2001. They carried out many studies, and they find that there's significant links between high EI and more successful interpersonal relations. I don't have one to say for now. Oh, people with high EQ, you'll end up seeing a massive, let's say, higher growth in sales. I need to dig a bit deeper and get those stats. And that's why I think maybe it hasn't been given the room that it needs, because maybe those aren't published as widely. Like, oh, did you know that those with a high EQ, or teams that are with a high EQ, you'll have a, I don't know, 60% less turnover, and you'll see a 80% increase in profitability.
Yeah, particularly in leadership, you can kind of see the connection is so clear. If you have a leader that has the high emotional intelligence, presumably they are looking after their employees much better than somebody who just doesn't understand and doesn't have those, doesn't have the emotional intelligence that you need to be a leader. So in my head, it's very kind of, the connection is very clear, but I agree. I think the reason why there's no more, there's this discrepancy between the number of women in the industry and research that shows that the EQ is so high with women is because EQ isn't as important as it maybe should be. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, correct. And in terms of women in SEO and having higher in general EQ, I'm sad to say that there's a lot of cases where women have a lot of good skills, but because either one, maybe was not seen as that important, or two, because the stats or the ROI wasn't as clearly visible. Um, it's not been, the support hasn't been there, and then women in the industry, maybe because of there's been so much. Sometimes when there's a lot of let's say, one gender in an industry like engineering, for example, there's very high barriers to get in, not necessarily for the grades, but just for being able to get along with your colleagues, being able to have a shared workplace without judgment, being able to speak your mind. There was a very interesting experiment that someone did. I can't remember the exact study it was, but it was basically these two people doing a job share, and it was a man and a woman. And then when the man was replying as the woman, because they had same email address, his responses that he got from people was very, very different, and more difficult. And when the woman had had an email address, his email address, I think maybe the email addresses got mixed up, she managed to get more work done. She spent less time justifying herself. She was able to make more progress. So that was very interesting. But I'll have to find where that study was. But unfortunately, it just seems to be the case that if there are some skills that are good for women, or that women tend to be naturally better at, it's not always been seen as, oh, that's great, let's bring her in.
Yeah, because there's also this misconception that emotional intelligence, it kind of like, some people say it's women are very emotional, and that's supposed to be like a negative connotation, when actually it can be a very positive thing. And if measured in terms of EQ, it is a positive thing. So I'm super interested in things like, I'm interested in everything, though, Jo, I'm all over the place. But it's a super interesting topic. Now, I'm mindful of time as well, and I could sit here for the next 3 hours talking about this type of thing. Do you have anything else, Jo, that we haven't spoken about that you want to say on the topic or in general, and then we can move on to room 404?
I just want to say thank you very much, Sean and Emina, for having me on the show. It is a very interesting topic. I would say encourage everyone to do your own mini EQ test. Of course, don't take it so seriously, some of these free ones. but just be aware of yourself. Be aware of how you're feeling, and then also how you're reacting to social situations. Do you fly off the handle? Do you want to take some time to yourself before you read and digest the situation and respond? But we're going to be working for a long time. I don't think we're going to have retirement like our parents or some parents. So you want to be able to enjoy your life, and I think if you're someone that gets stressed easily, and it's very difficult for you to read the room, and you end up sort of having some detrimental relationships because you're not able to see your own emotions, spend some time on you. Do these tests, and I gave some examples earlier about how you respond to different situations, and think about that. And because otherwise you might end up alienating yourself in your work life, and then it translates into your personal life too, and that leads to more loneliness, anxiety, and which is not good for anyone's physical or mental well-being.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to be clear, we do one of the things that we haven't spoken about, and I'm hoping to get a guest in to talk about the other side of it, which is neurodiversity and kind of the EQ. If you look through the lens of that, it's a big topic. But to be clear, we are not, we do, all of us here understand that that is very difficult if you are neurodiverse, and some of the things that we've spoken about today might not apply. But yeah, hopefully we can get another episode specifically around emotional intelligence and understanding people with neurodiversity. So
Absolutely. I mean, if people have got questions, and obviously, we'd love to have that discussion in after this episode as well. So, any discussion is key for kind of, working towards, obviously, well, yeah, just discussing these issues really. I mean, I, for one, the self-awareness and obviously self-regulation are two kind of points really, which I've taken away from the conversation, which I think probably a lot of the world's problems and a lot of the online problems that we see these days could probably be solved if people actually were more self-aware and actually sat and thought a couple of minutes and took a pause before they actually acted upon those impulses or that reaction. So but no, thank you so much, Jo. I think we'll move on to room 404 to end this wonderful podcast. And room 404 is the segment where we banish something to room 404 to never see the light of day again. Well, technically, because it could be 301 redirected. So we always have that little option to us in the future in case we want to change that. When we have you as a guest again, you may want to 301 redirect it out of room 404. So, but do you have something that you would like to banish into room 404 this week for us?
Yes, I would say something to ban into room 404 would be people that RSVP to events and don't show up without saying they cannot attend.
Okay, yeah, I think we can all get down with that one. Yeah, I think we've just started our own event, and we were talking about this obviously prior to the podcast, but yeah, it's definitely something we've started to experience even with like small local events. Is obviously just updating the RSVP on your event can really help, and yeah, courtesy I guess is probably the best way to describe it. So.
Yeah, emotional intelligence. There you go.
Yeah,
having the emotional.
That's a good
although
example.
I would say that's also like it's IQ as well. I mean, it's kind of both in my mind. It's yeah, because of the fact that the event management, it has so many things that you need to organize with it. So even from like the practical, cognitive side of things, you should do it because of the fact that you might have booked catering or whatever it may be. So yeah, no, it's a good one. Thank you, Jo.
Absolutely.
We agree.
And Jo, where can everybody find you on the internet, on your socials, anywhere, any places where people can find and connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. People can find me on Twitter. I'm SEO Jo Blogs on Twitter, or I'm J Turnbull on LinkedIn, or they can also find me on Search London, searchldn.com. And our next event is June 17th.
Brilliant. So if you haven't already got your tickets, please do consider going to Search London. We're definitely going to see if it lines up with our calendar and see if we can go. So we hopefully will also see you there as well. And that's a great point to end. So thank you so much, Jo, for coming to SEOs Getting Coffee. It was great to have you, and hopefully we'll be able to have you again. Thanks so much. Emina, thank you, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye-bye.